This is KLEAN Radio.
Welcome everybody out there listening to KLEAN Radio, a show about addiction and recovery and everything in the middle. In the studio, of course, is my co-host with the most, the amazing Andrew Spanswick.
Does that mean you have less than me?
I don't know.
If I have the
sometimes
most.
your jokes are a little too smart for me.
Yeah, okay.
It makes me think a little.
Right.
But you know,
It's a good thing to think.
One of the cool things about Andrew, he's been in the industry of helping people, and we don't have any guests in studio tonight. Tonight, our callers are our guests, but you've been helping people for a long time, 22 years, a little longer.
Right.
And Rand, our amazing director, brought us this story about the health gap, the worst places in America for mental health. And I mean, there are counties where for every one person, you know, for one mental health professional, there's 59,000 people that are suffering. And I think one of the coolest things about that we get to do this show is that people get to call in and ask questions that they might not be able to afford to see a mental health provider. They may not know that they should go.
Right, and that doesn't necessarily even mean it's a good one.
Yeah.
Right? It's like one for 55,000 people.
It could be the local person.
And I mean, I was shocked by the stats. I mean, this is a new study that just came out, and those are the worst, obviously, but the average mean is one for every 1,620 people. So if you go to prisons, there's one for about every 250. So you actually get more access to mental health in prison, which just blew me away when I saw those stats. So, it's kind of a sad case. But yeah, at least we're here on the radio and we can help people out and welcome their calls and talk about whatever issues are going on, whether it's substance abuse or mental health issues. And
we're interested in hearing from you tonight. And I just think that is a shocking number. And we're blessed in Los Angeles from New York, the major cities, whether it's 12-step meetings, whether it's the availability of therapy or, psychology or any of these things. But we forget sometimes, and I talk about that a lot. We take it for granted that, if you want to go to a 12-step meeting in LA, they're about 40,000 a week almost, or just of all different varieties. You could find a therapist on every corner almost, and we're very lucky.
Yeah, and we don't just see this with therapists, we're seeing it with doctors. In the more rural areas, you have places where doctors actually have to travel around to 4 or 5 cities just to provide care. And it's a real crisis in our country. And, the AMA hasn't done a good job of getting more doctors in, and we're bringing in more foreign doctors. And one of the hardest things that I deal with is a lot of psychiatrists are actually from foreign countries, and so they don't speak very clear English often. And you'd think that would sort of be a requirement for a psychiatrist, unless their job purely is to listen to you on the couch. So,
if you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222.
Have you spent a lot of money on people listening to you on the couch?
Yes.
And then they weren't girlfriends.
You're a funny guy. And so give us a call. Give us a call with any problems you have, anything. And Rand also gave us another great story for tonight, and I've seen a lot of this, and I'm sure everybody online has seen this, and it's the faces of drugs. It's where they take the before picture and then they take the after picture. And I wanted to actually bring Rand in for this, but he got camera shy. But one of the reasons
it's the after picture.
One of the reasons I wanted to talk about this tonight was because I don't think this scares addicts. And I love that we have a non-addict that helps direct the show, because he brings us these stories and I get to see his perspective on things, because we live in the, for him, when he sees these pictures of the faces of meth, he sees it.
If you're an addict, you're probably selling TVs, not watching them.
Right. So. And it doesn't necessarily scare you.
There's a lot of denial, too. I mean, there's been such a history in our country of propaganda that's anti-drug that it's hard for anybody to believe anything they see on TV now.
Right.
That's from any sort of organization, be it public health or some sort of, social change agency, which are often churches or other groups. So unfortunately, there's no credibility to a lot of the information that's public health information that should really be out there to help people learn. The other thing is, once you're addicted, you don't care.
Right.
It's not about how you look. I mean, you look in the mirror, and most addicts don't actually have a good representation of how they actually see themselves. They get what's called dysphoria. And they actually, when they look in the mirror, what they see is not the way they really look. They have an idea that, especially if they're doing speed or coke, they think that, they actually look better than they ever have, and so you get a lot of this delusional sort of sense of self that goes on with addicts. And that's a big thing that's hard to break off. And when people are addicted is they stop using and they get depressed. and then they think, oh, I can just go back to using, and I'll think I'm hot again.
So that's actually an interesting question, because growing up in the '80s, you had the Nancy Reagan campaign of just say no.
Yeah, it was very effective.
But you've had this constant stream of scaring people away from not doing drugs.
Right.
Do you honestly think, being in the industry and I'd love to hear people's opinions on this, because I want to know, is there anything you could do to scare somebody away from doing drugs?
I think you can scare people to a point, and then unfortunately, if people start using and then they find out that at first use it doesn't cause the huge problems that people say it does, then they distrust the initial information, and then they eventually have an opportunity to get themselves in a position where they actually become addicted, and then the horrible things do happen. But as we know, that's only about 10% of the population, so 10 to 12%. So the people that actually get to the point of addiction, most people can moderate their use and then stop using. But the people that can, or the people that have underlying psychiatric issues that they're self-medicating for, they're going to have problems with these issues. So,
and if you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio, so give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. It's 800-222-5222. Tonight, you're our guest. And, it's funny, we're up against March Madness tonight. And,
so I was like, there's no traffic coming in. Is everybody just stuck
everybody's
to their
watching
TV?
March Madness.
You see the gambling stats that came out? And they're about to legalize online gambling on the internet. That's crazy. It's going to get really out of control. So
yeah, there's I mean, here's the thing. It's about that. There's so much access with the online gambling. There's and it's become so easy,
right.
and you lose everything from a click. And there's nothing stopping you.
You don't have to go find a friend with $10 to bet against.
Right. Or find a bookie, or do it illegally, or feel that, there's...
This is more your area. I never really got into, you were, into gambling, right?
I was definitely into gambling, and it affected my life greatly. And, the online stuff gives you the instant access, and nobody's watching. It takes away the shame that you might have of, going out, and it does all that stuff.
It's a lot like porn around the internet for sex addicts, yeah.
And, a lot of people, when they, it's really funny in the poker world, they call it Black Friday, when they shut down all of the, internet gaming sites, all the internet, there's that debate. What do you do? And, I don't know. I'm asking you, I don't know. And
there's definitely going to just be, there is this weird thing where if you create supply for something, there is an increase in demand. And with the Volstead Act, with prohibition, it did decrease the rates of alcoholism. It did decrease the rates of problems with alcohol, but it created an illicit market for alcohol. And the things that occurred because of that, the violence and the criminal behavior grew. And, these vice sort of areas of life have always been controlled largely by criminal groups. I mean, even the Kennedy family made all their money off alcohol. So, and they still make quite a bit of money out of alcohol. So, it's a real hard thing to decide whether you're going to regulate and moderate use somehow through regulation, and then tax, and then provide treatment, hopefully, which we've never really done. We don't do it for alcohol, certainly, and we haven't done it for drugs. Even with marijuana now becoming legal in a bunch of states, there's really very little money diverted to treatment. And then this whole 1-800 gambling thing is, I think the inside scoop on that. It's an inside deal where they're pushing money out. So, there really isn't a really thoughtful stance about how to regulate and how to divert taxed funds to really help people that get caught in the trap of these vices.
But again, this is what we were talking about last week when Pat O'Brien was in studio, was about breaking the stigma. Mm-hmm. There's still so much stigma attached to so many, with everything. And I really believe that's what prevents people from getting help, is that fear of being looked at, being ostracized, and, whether it's by your family.
And the same thing, though, we have a generation of younger people who are growing up in this isolated space of the internet where they don't really have to deal with anybody. It's just them and a computer. And so and addictions are isolating diseases anyway. Yeah. So as people become more and more isolated to begin with, then it's easier for them to express their addictive behavior.
Anyways, if you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio, so give us a call. That's 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. What's interesting is we were talking about that, and we'll get to the calls in a second because they are lining up, but one of the things we were talking about is, mental health providers. There being one for every, so-and-so. And one of the cool things about doing the radio show is that we get to talk to people that may not have access. And we also sometimes find ourselves talking about things that we're learning, like about how to help people better, about for people to get help.
Yeah, and I think, as people become more accepting of also as addiction just spreads and becomes more and more widespread, we're having to come up and deal with this on all sorts of levels, both from a treatment perspective, but also as a country, how financially we're going to afford to treat all these people. So
we have a bunch of people in the studio tonight. I can't show their faces, but it's pretty cool because they're the face. Like how we have the faces of
don't say death. Like,
but these are the faces we have in the studio of sobriety, and it's really cool. And make some noise. Yeah, you got to make some noise. Scream. You guys can scream. And that's our in-house live studio audience. And we have the healthiest man in America in studio, and it drives me crazy. We have Ravi, who actually is in the best shape of it's just Andrew. He's in too good shape for us.
I know. Well, that's why.
Yeah, we got to put weight on him. But let's go to Joyce. I want to go to Joyce, and they're not going to be able to hear the phone call, so I'm sorry about that. But let's go to Joyce in Portland. Welcome to KLEAN Radio, Joyce.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good. I'm good.
Well, my question is, have you heard of a disease that has to do with marijuana, and it actually shuts down your major organs, and it builds up such a toxicity in your system that when you're done with the cycle and you're done smoking, however long it takes, you vomit, and you vomit like 30, 40, 100 times a day.
It's called a bad batch of marijuana.
No.
I mean, I haven't heard of that specifically, but different people have different thresholds for when their body can handle toxic chemicals or smokes or whatever they're ingesting. And different people can have largely different reactions to it. I mean, even with peanuts, we see that kids sometimes have anaphylactic reactions and, their throat swells up and chokes to death. Now, we do know that smoking anything into your lungs, especially tobacco, we have a lot of data on that. 1 out of every 2 smokers will die from smoking-related death, and that is from major organ failure, either your heart or your lungs primarily, but other things as well. And then you're looking at marijuana that has 4 times the tar in the smoke as tobacco. So it only goes to say if you have people that are chronic marijuana smokers, they're going to start seeing more and more evidence of these diseases coming out.
I want to tell you, Joyce, you actually raised a good question, and I really want to thank you for the call. But Andrew, she's talking about something really... Okay, and you and I have discussed this. We were watching a video of Sanjay Gupta last week on CNN and
right.
Or Pierre, whatever he was on, and... we don't know the effects of long-term marijuana use yet. We just don't know. And especially with the new stuff coming out and it being stronger and stronger than it's ever been. And, it's almost like I'd rather err on the side of caution than on the side of somebody like him that says, well, nobody's ever died from it.
Yeah, I got an argument with him in the green room about that in New York because I was going on CNN and he was in the green room and I said, did you look at any studies for people that died when they got in accidents on marijuana? And he's like, oh, there's no data on that. I'm like, so how can you say nobody ever died on marijuana?
Right. So,
I mean, I've seen a lot of dumb things done while people are on pot.
And they do it very slowly.
Yeah,
it's dumb and done slowly. But one of the things, it drives me crazy because, I don't mind, we've spoken about this on the show. We're not the temperance movement, and if people want to legalize drugs, but
I'm for legalization.
Yeah, but let's be real. For the people that want to do it, you want to get high.
Yeah,
I mean that's okay.
And there are people that have legitimate uses for it, but the number of users related to the number of people that actually have a real medical need for it is just sort of statistically irrelevant.
And to the people out there, ask yourselves why you're fighting so hard to get high. Or spiritual, or whatever you want to call it.
Spiritual, right.
You're fighting so hard. What's wrong with your regular life that you need to fight so hard to get high?
Like I said, I'm not anti-marijuana being legal. I'm pro-legalization, but I do think that, typically we hand things like this over to the government. Like I said, anybody that wants to smoke marijuana now can get it. I mean, the idea that marijuana is somehow it is a class 1 scheduled drug. It's, is on the highest schedule that it can possibly be. But at the same point, anyone that wants to smoke it can get it readily. And, the problem is the government takes it over, then they divert the money into taxes to cover things that like roads and whatever, and then they don't really think about how to regulate the THC levels or other active substances in the drug, and they don't think about really dispensing it and marketing issues with children. They don't think about how to really make sure that the money that they raise in taxes is actually used for helping people that do have a problem with it. And even compensating families for people that are injured by people that are smoking and then, hit them in a car. I mean, that would be a good thing to use some of that tax money for. Colorado's making $1 million a day or something like that on tax money. And I guarantee you there's no victim compensation fund from the state.
Well, that's one of the things I always say, where we wanted to bring up is that for every, marijuana clinic that's open, they should open up a mental health clinic at the same time.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if a state's going to take that huge tax on marijuana, they should have some responsibility for, taking that money and giving back. They're actually engaging in drug dealing, which is really kind of funny. I mean, and we do that with prescription drugs already as well, but we don't see any responsibility by the states to take these huge amount of taxes on these things.
Well, same thing with the lottery, going back to gambling.
Yep.
We take no responsibility for the person that's spending their last dollar on a lottery ticket. And it's gambling.
One of the things I like about the history of America was that there used to be no federal or state tax systems. It was all lotteries.
Yeah.
Nobody had a federal state tax, so you just got your paycheck or whatever. You got your payment for work, and then there were lotteries that raised money for making roads and stuff like that. Now we have taxes and lotteries. So welcome to America.
And so give us a call. It's KLEAN Radio. We're all over the place tonight, but in a good way. Give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Let's go to Heather, who's calling to check in. Heather, what's going on in Vermont?
It's cold. And
It is cold in Vermont.
Yes, I bet.
And you're talking about, taking meetings for granted. And in my town, there's only one meeting a week, so I have to go to other towns if I want to go to meetings.
So how many people are in your town that there's one meeting a week?
2,500.
2,500. You figure 10%? Of them are alcoholic,
Yeah, but maybe 1% are in treatment, so you've got, you're down to 25.
So, it's actually, it's sort of cool that you actually have to go out of town and seek help.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Yeah.
Except when there's snowstorms.
Yeah. But aside from that, I'm not doing so well this week, and I don't know if I explained before, but I have difficulty with March anyway, because March is sort of like a anniversary month where really, really good things or really bad things happen in March.
Well, I'm guessing this March hasn't been good.
Yeah. Well, it started off with having a small car accident at the beginning of the month.
Right.
And then this past Friday, after work, I got a digest email. I'm on a mailing list. And in the same digest email, I found out that somebody I knew passed away, and I also found out that my ex-husband got married.
Wow.
I mean, those are horrible things that have happened, but it's really important that you not associate it with the month.
Yeah.
And because what you're doing is you're actually reinforcing the idea that bad things are going to happen in March, and that's what we call magical thinking. There's actually no real scientific evidence that things happen to people 1 month of the year, and we tend to become superstitious, and that creates more anxiety about the month coming up.
Yeah.
And it really it kind of loads you up with all this anxiety and fear, and you get this anticipatory anxiety that can lead to real problems, and you can actually create problems for yourself by not being centered and being where you are in the real time and real space.
I can't agree. I couldn't. Heather, are you a horoscope person?
No.
Okay, good.
They call them horoscopes for a reason.
And I don't understand what I agree with you. It's like people read the horoscopes.
It's
and
horoscope, by the way.
Horoscope, and they live their and they live their lives through this horoscope. You read it in the morning. Horoscope. I got it.
And you're saying horror.
Horoscope.
All right. Okay. We'll work on this later.
And you're it's like you're living through this, Heather, and it's almost like manifest destiny. You're saying it's March coming up. I'm going to decide how good it's going to be or how bad it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, no, and I am trying to maintain a positive attitude. And actually, for the last 4 or 5 years, I haven't had the anxiety about March.
Good.
It's just
this was a bad March.
Yeah, this was a bad March. We're not whined. We don't.
Well, also, I think it's important to realize that bad things happen all the time, and that's part of life. The question is, how do you develop coping skills and tools?
Or schools. That would be
schools,
cool.
coping school, right? That's called therapy, I guess. But where, you can actually have a tool bag and a set of skills so that if something bad happens, you actually can rely on that instead of just using like worry and depression and ruminating thinking and all these things that can really, quickly run you down a rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I did positive things. I did go to a meeting. I shared there. I went to the gym. I watched The Little Mermaid.
Well, that's good.
Little Mermaid's good.
And on the positive side, like I said, good stuff, really good stuff happens in March as well. And I got on Thursday, I got a very positive, work review for the year.
That's great.
So, yay for that. And my cat is healthy. You remember, I was so upset about my cat and the feeding tube. Well, he's all healthy now.
You see, there you go. And Heather, I think it's really important. And we speak about this, not enough people talk about this. Listen, I'm sober quite a while. But sometimes, Andrew, especially in the 12-step world, they put too much focus on time stuff. That this is, and I always say I love counting time because it helps me remember things in chronological order.
Right.
But we put so much focus. It's like year 13 was bad. Year 10 was. You're not a wine. This is this is life, and it's so you're gonna have good days. You're gonna, and I think it's very dangerous sometimes to say that year was a bad year. That's just my thoughts on that.
Well, it's a good thought, Judah.
Yeah, thank you. Every once in a while. But you know what I'm saying? Because you're not a big fan of that stuff. You're not a big fan of...
I think it's magical thinking, and I think that, if you ruminate and think about things and always look back on the negative, you're setting yourself up for negative in the future. And, bad things are going to happen to you in the future if you're alive. But there's better ways to cope with them than just always thinking back, oh, this is just the same thing that happens every March, and it just you're just digging a hole of depression. I think we're running out of time for this section of the show, but...
And Heather, listen, it's March 30th.
Yes, I know. The month's almost over.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
So if you sleep in tomorrow...
It's almost April Fool's.
You're good to go.
All right.
I'll talk to you next time, Heather.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Heather.
Thank you. And if you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio, so give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. And there's 800-222-5222. I accidentally just dropped the wrong caller.
Oh, well, hopefully they call back.
Bob from Portland, if that's your name, give us a call back. And he actually wanted to talk about, he smoked pot, I think, for the first time in 53 years.
Wow, that'd be good to talk
So
about.
I'd actually love to hear how that went, Bob. And the discussion continues on KLEAN Radio.
Cool.
Hey, it's Joe Pantoliano, and you're listening to KLEAN Radio. Watch my visit at the show at KLEANradio.com. That's clean with a K, you prick.
Don't let addiction to drugs or alcohol steal another year of your life. KLEAN Treatment Center provides world-class addiction assistance that also treats the underlying causes and provides vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean. Live, kind, professional help is standing by to provide immediate assistance or to simply answer questions and provide guidance. If you or someone you care about is suffering from addiction, take action now and make 2014 the best year of your life with KLEAN Treatment Center. That's clean with a K. Now back to Andrew Spanswick and Judah Friedman.
Welcome back to KLEAN Radio. We actually have an amazing studio audience tonight. We just can't show their faces because of anonymity. Say that again? Oh, you're supposed to cheer whenever I say that. We have an amazing studio audience. Hey! It could still be like a track that we have in the background just to make it sound like we have a studio audience. Right. But we actually do, and it's pretty special for us because it's people that it's the faces of addiction that we've seen actually get help. And, there are a lot of people out there that are driving, and sometimes we talk about this a lot, that it's so hard. They see the faces. They see the faces online and I can't show you. So if you're looking at the screen when we replay the show, it's the faces of what happens after meth use. How you were before and how you were after.
Well, they're from arrest records, right?
And,
so it's progressive addiction.
And driver's licenses, I think.
Right. It's not just meth. It's all sorts of drugs.
All sorts of drugs. So it's sort of cool but the problem is there's not really much where they show the people that are in recovery. So if you're driving or you're listening from home or wherever you are, there is hope, and we get tons of calls, from people going, is there hope? And there is.
One of the things that I think is interesting about those pictures is that people assume that people look badly because of the drug they're using.
Right.
And they don't think about what are called externalities. So those are the secondary events that you don't directly apply to the drug. So if someone's using methamphetamine or even marijuana a lot or whatever, they're going to start doing things like having traffic accidents, like losing their job. Their health is going to degrade.
Getting in fights.
Right. They might have careless sex and end up with an STD or HIV or AIDS. So a lot of these pictures you see, it's like, they're like, oh, I knew someone that smoked meth for 5 years and they didn't lose all their teeth and their skin didn't fall apart and they didn't like waste away. But yeah, that person that did do it and wasted away probably got HIV and AIDS or something else or hepatitis C. I mean, there's so many things out there that are secondary problems related to the use of substances, and people overlook that. They overlook all those secondary things you have to deal with if someone has a problem with addiction.
I think they almost have to overlook it.
Homelessness is a huge part of it.
I got to tell you, I wish I could tell you. I'll remember this in a minute. But when I was driving, there was a homeless guy with a T-shirt, and I can't remember the slogan. I'm going to get it from the person in the studio tonight. But you're right. We have a homeless problem. We have all these. And we're not dealing with it.
Yeah.
And
we have a huge prison population. Yeah.
And so
biggest in the first world.
But here's something very interesting. We've spoken about this a lot, but there's a brand new study on this where most prescription drug abusers get pills from friends, not the drug dealers.
Yeah.
And although
I think most of us would say that our drug dealers were our friends.
Right. That's true. Right? Until you get sober. Right. And you see who's visiting you in rehab.
And you're on speed dial for some reason.
It's never the drug dealer visiting you in rehab. And and I think people out there listening, you have to be careful. When you go to the doctor, when you go to the dentist, and the dentist, you could be a parent and the dentist gives you hydrocodone or he gives you codeine or whatever it is, and you just put it in the medicine cabinet because you don't take it. You got to be careful. You have teenagers. That's the first place they're going to look.
Yeah, and a lot of people, there's craziness. Like people actually go, if you put your house on the market, there's people that just go on housing tours and they go rob all the medicine cabinets. And we've been seeing.
You're giving people in the studio an idea.
Yeah,
for
right.
The next,
I was like, why didn't I think of that?
But that goes
But
to
what I'm saying though is that if you're gonna put your house on the market, lock up any prescription drugs you have, because there are people out there that are just going through to rifle through your stuff.
And what you just said frustrates the families and friends of addicts more than anything in the world, because they look at how. How genius these ideas are to get high. Because most regular people, wouldn't think, how am I going to get high? Let's go to open houses.
I remember a long time ago, I was doing a group with schizophrenics in an acute care psychiatric unit that I was director of social services for. And we have these things called like activities of daily living and process groups, which you're supposed to talk about like how people get by and what they're supposed to do, like, comb your hair, brush your teeth, for like the real simple things. But then one day I was like, I've been doing this group for like 6 months and nobody really ever seems to care. So I like opened it up to the group to like tell me what their like best coping skill was. I could not believe the stories I heard. I mean, these guys were like, yeah, you break open a refrigerator and you take the magnet out of the refrigerator and then you stick that on your electric meter and it stops it from turning. You don't have to pay for electricity. And I'm like, but then at the same point, I'm like, this is horrible in a way. But at the same point, I was like, really, these are the coping skills. If you don't have any money and you're homeless or, about to be homeless, stealing electricity becomes a coping skill. And, it's strange that, here I was in a position to be helping people, but the real ways that people have to cope and get by with the resources they have end up becoming criminal. And that's what we've done. We've criminalized people in poverty and people that have mental illness because they have to do things that are illegal and unethical just to survive.
So last week we were actually, by the way, give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Last week we were talking about this, and a lot of feedback after the show about how to break the stigma of mental health. And so I'm sober, and we call that a mental illness, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so part of the problem is nobody wants to be, to me, and we had a guest. I don't want to bring up who the guest was, but I'm an alcoholic and the homeless guy in the street. If we lump mental illness all together, you might not want to be lumped together. And I think sometimes that's wherein lies, one of the problems is that we don't have mental illness A, B, C, D, Yeah,
that's classism in a way. Right. Also, I mean, we have that in America with jobs. We don't really want to think that you're going to be unemployed, and we don't want to think that, and you want to think you're going to be like a Wall Street banker or a doctor. right? You know, the reality is that there's a spectrum in a class system, and we have a class system. And America doesn't deal well with class because we have this belief that you can always transcend your social class. The reality is, though, statistically, that less than 1% of people will go up in social class from the one they're born into in their life. So it's actually a somewhat rare occurrence. Only 1 in 100 people will ever transcend where they were born into in their family. So, you know, how accurate is this American dream that we're representing? Now, I actually think it's an amazing thing to live in America. I love America, and I think it's, you know, a huge wealth of opportunity. But I also had a lot of advantages, you know, came from a smart family, you know, parents that had money. I always had a safety net. And that gave me a chance to get a lot of education, which was very expensive, you know, and I had a lot of opportunities to do things. And then after that, it was my responsibility to do well. Thankfully, I've been able to do that. I've also had some times when it wasn't so easy. But, you know, it's not what everybody thinks it is, you know.
Right, but as far as breaking the stigma, is it possible to separate that? I
think the first thing is you just have to really have a real view of it. I mean, you know, people think that mentally ill means that you're sick and homeless on the street and you're talking to yourself.
Right.
And they don't realize that there's people in really rich families that are mentally ill that actually get treatment and you never see them. So they get the proper medication and they have the support systems and they have, you know, access to proper health care. And they're never cured because we don't have necessarily cures for a lot of these illnesses. We don't have a cure for addiction, but we can manage these chronic illnesses.
Right, but what I'm saying is that where part of the problem is that we do lump things together and people don't want to have it lumped together.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
that's why you get the rich people hiding the fact that they have a mental illness.
Right.
Right. And, you know, they don't want to admit to it, or even with addiction. You know, it's only recently in the last few years that, you know, it's really come out that all these celebrities have addictions. And I think that's largely driven by tabloid marketing, not by any real interest in mental health reform or reform of addiction services.
So give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. You're listening to KLEAN Radio. So, but you see, the part of the thing, Andrew, is you've been in this. You've been in the mental health industry for a long time. So you've gotten all the scopes, right? So you don't see it as an issue with somebody that's an alcoholic, right? Not wanting to be called mentally ill. Mm-hmm. Even though we consider.
See, for me, like labels like alcoholic, mentally ill, the reason that a lot of those labels are created originally in our language is so that people that are working with those problems can define them. Unfortunately, people that become defined often will adopt that label as their identity,
right?
Instead of realizing that that's actually an illness. Like, you know, cancer survivor even is adopting the disease of cancer. That doesn't have as much stigma as saying, you know what, I survived a bout of depression and alcoholism.
Right.
So, you know, and I now know that that's a chronic progressive illness and I have to deal with it daily. So it's, you know, we haven't really crossed that barrier where people can sort of be proud of overcoming mental illness and addiction. And that's a shame because, you know, 50% of the population plus is going to have a bout of major depression or a severe problem with anxiety in the American population. That's a huge number.
Right.
So over 150 million people in our country in their lifetime are going to have a primary mental illness. And we don't really deal with it. We have MDs handing out antidepressants with no information. You know, they don't get any therapy, and we know that antidepressants alone have a very poor rate of effectiveness. It has to be combined with therapy to get good outcomes.
No, and I was asking this just because I went home after the show and I was thinking about it, and you know, somebody was talking to me about this, about, you know, breaking the stigma. They love the topic, and somebody in their family has, you know, mental, you know, they're an alcoholic who's sober, and somebody in their family has mental health issues, and it was almost like it was two separate. It was two, you know, it wasn't the same person, and she didn't refer to herself as mental health issue. She was referring to her family member with a mental health issue. And I just, you know, I started thinking about that, and it's like you're not saying, well, both of us are mentally ill.
Yeah.
And because there's a fear, obviously, there's a stigma and all that jazz.
We also know that there's correlations between mental illness and it being passed on genetically. So there's other diseases like that, like epilepsy, even diabetes, although now we're seeing type 2 diabetes come out in huge rates. But those were traditionally diseases that were stigmatized as well. And people would not get married to people that had those diseases because that was the only way to deal with these chronic diseases was to try and not marry people that had them.
Right.
Now we're getting to know a little bit more about genetics and we're getting better at coming up with ways to deal with these problems. And some of these illnesses have been destigmatized a lot. Hopefully science will continue to progress and we'll get better and better results. And, hopefully one day will come where we don't have to have these conversations. But there still is a part of human nature that I don't think is completely curable. And what drives us to do things that are great can also drive us to do things that can be very self-destructive. And I think that's just an innate part of human nature. So how you get rid of the bad and not get rid of the good is always a tough thing.
So you're listening to KLEAN Radio. Give us a call. That's 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. I understand March Madness is going on tonight. I like watching college basketball, and gambling's on the rise during this month. And like you said, there's thinking about opening up the online gambling again. We knew that was going to happen.
It's already happening. New Jersey's approved it, and it's coming up on a bunch of ballots. So.
And are we coming into the time where the shift of addictions almost, we're going to have to learn how to treat things so much differently because people are just staying home and doing their addiction?
I think our whole culture, unfortunately, is suffering. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. The old buggy whip argument that, when buggy whips became useless because of the automobile, should we have kept buggy whip companies around? And the answer is clearly no. There's no need for them. So capitalism gives us a way to shift our resources and then create more automobiles than buggy companies. The thing is that we get the same sort of progression in our own society where we're going along and things are changing. And as we become a country that really doesn't have, a lot of the traditional jobs that we used to, and it takes education and intelligence to be able to actually have a job in this country, we're starting to see more and more separation of the wealthy people and the poor people. And we're starting to see a lot of people that are frustrated with a lot of time on their hands. So we've created a whole industry of entertainment. And a lot of that is gaming. It's, video games. It's, gambling. It's marketing alcohol in new ways. It's, people didn't used to go out like the way they go out,
Right.
Maybe they did, I guess, in different ways, but, it's more widespread now. We have more people doing more, overall the country has more money than it's ever had. So, but a lot is going into these things. I mean, we now have Vice, mutual funds where there's these mutual fund managers that are buying up stocks that relate to vices, gambling stocks,
right,
alcohol stocks, tobacco stocks, and they run those at a mutual fund. I mean, whoever thought that would happen, right?
I'm going to tell you something funny I saw this week on Facebook. Somebody decided to tell everybody they were getting off Facebook. And I've never seen something as narcissistic.
How do they tell them they've stayed off Facebook?
No, but this is what the person said, and he's on my page, and he goes, "I'm leaving Facebook because I want to get into the real world, so I don't want everybody worrying about me." So right away, you're assuming that people are going to worry about you because they don't see you on Facebook, and then you have to make a public announcement that you're actually leaving Facebook.
Right.
And I thought, wow, that's just so disturbingly narcissistic. And
and just talking with the millennium generation, as they're calling them, it's just amazing to me how different their views of privacy are. The concept that privacy is important to you as yourself and that there's some things that you don't need to share with everyone. I mean, it's important to have a self-identity and also to have a realm of your life that's private and you only share with a few people. But and now everybody just wants to be randomly liked for the most ridiculous things. And then they actually create their sense of self-worth and value from how many times what they ate for dinner is liked.
It's funny, though, a couple of weeks ago, remember when I didn't know that how you took a selfie? When I didn't, when I was curious, I'm happy I don't know. I know how you take a selfie,
It's just
guys.
lack of coordination.
What the thing was, I didn't understand was how I saw the phone as you were taking the selfie.
You didn't know about a mirror.
I didn't realize that people were doing it by the mirror. And I'm happy that I don't know. I'm happy that I don't know.
You're still in mourning over your losing your girlfriend. You got all the mirrors covered in black drapes.
Andrew really knows how to make a guy feel good. My God. Is he? Yeah, wow. And
I'm entertaining the studio audience tonight.
Yeah, I know. It's,
Judah's expense.
Thank you, Rand.
Let's jump into a call. Come on.
And let's. Wow, I'm a little hurt.
I threw
and
you for
think-
a loop. I'm
I think
sorry,
Andrew's
Judah.
gonna owe me an amends. And
okay.
let's go to Todd in Salem. Welcome to Clean Radio, Todd.
Hey,
As
Todd.
always, Todd.
Hi.
How you doing?
Hi, Judah. Hi, Andrew. Hi, studio audience.
And Todd, their phone sounds great this week.
Yeah, I sweet talked the nurse and the getting on the phone.
So
in the
there was
office.
another phone.
there
Judah,
wasn't-
after making so much fun of Judah all week, there was actually a better phone.
Yeah, it's in the nurse's office.
That's so
though.
funny. Wow. So what does sweet talking a nurse entail?
Just tell them what they want to hear.
That's that you've taken your
Oh,
meds
she's
and you're
glaring
doing
at
well?
me.
Oh, now she's
She's
glaring
glaring-
at you?
yeah,
Oh, no.
she's
Okay.
glaring at
All
me.
right. Well, don't ruin it.
I don't. But there's some news here. One of the staff got accused of sexually abusing a patient,
I'm sure they
And-
love you calling and telling the world that from the hospital.
and a guy just walked off yesterday, and he was like 1 month away from finishing his 20-year sentence.
Wow. He walked
Yeah.
off with how long did he have left? 1 week, you said?
1 month.
Oh, 1 month. Yeah, a lot of people become institutionalized, which means that they become so accustomed to being in an institution that when it comes time to leave, they actually get full of fear and terror and anxiety, and they sort of sabotage their ability to leave by doing something wrong so that they can get locked up for longer, because it's the only way they know how to cope. I did some work a long time ago with schizophrenics, and it was when some of the new antipsychotics were coming out, and we were only able to use it on people that had very severe forms of schizophrenia. And what we found was when we gave it to them and they'd been sick for 20 plus years, that they would get better, and then they would realize that they'd been sick for 20 plus years, and there was a very high suicide rate. So with those patients. So we're learning more and more that, the process of what we call termination and how people move and transition from one state of care to a lower state of care is very important. So we work diligently on that process of transition. So we try to make it as smooth as possible. So if you come into rehab or you go into hospital, then the next step down is about, what are the major needs that a person has. You ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? It starts with like food, clothing, shelter, and then there's other, unless you have those, you can't function on other things, right? So it's about making sure that people meet their basic needs, and then also, and for someone that's mentally ill, it becomes more challenging because your basic needs also become medication compliance, support systems to get that medication, and resources to get that stuff. So, and therapists that can understand and help transition you into a regular environment.
And Todd, I think the important thing is that you learn the lesson, and I know you have a long sentence left over there.
Yeah.
But it's, you're doing the right things in your sentence. You're getting your college courses, and you're doing all those things that you could get back into the world. So
I'm really focused on
and that's great.
getting out and stuff. And
Todd,
I just have to do whatever they tell me.
Yeah.
And you know how alcoholics, they like to do what they think.
Yeah. No, Todd, totally. And you're doing the right thing. And, listen, we get this in rehab all the time, that people that are scared to leave, they'll go and relapse, and so they could come back.
I actually also worry about the people that their life becomes all about, being sober, and they take on that identity as their main thing. The purpose of getting sober is so that you can then function in your daily life and then enjoy what life's really about, which is
I think at the
work
beginning
and loving
you have
people.
to be a little bit, though.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that like right away you just like, hey,
Right. Throughout
stop
time.
drinking.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna everything's fine.
Just start clubbing.
Right, but there's a period of transition, and you need to be focused, and sometimes you have to go back and be more centered on dealing with whatever illness you have is, whether it's addiction or mental illness. You have to deal with it sometimes more than you would, even sometimes after long periods of time. So you might be fine for 10, 15 years, and then for whatever reason your hormones change, or you have something crisis in your life, someone dies, or whatever, some situational issue comes up, and that can bring back a lot of the things that trigger you to use, or it can activate a mental illness that's been currently controlled with medication.
So, Todd, I think that's a great lesson for you is, you have time left on your sentence, and you're using the best of your time.
And if that guy comes back, which he probably will, because they're going to be out looking for him.
Welcome him back with open arms.
Yeah, tell him, you care about him, and let him know that he needs to think about, why he did that.
Yeah, and when he comes back, tell him to call.
Maybe he's listening to the radio right now.
Yeah. You never know. There's not much else probably going on.
Go back to Todd. Todd is a good guy.
This is how stupid he was. He went to Denny's. When he left, he walked into Denny's, had coffee. Or
Yeah, I would have gone to McDonald's.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
So Todd, listen, stay the course, my friend.
Okay, sure appreciate your show.
And
thanks a lot
Todd, we
for helping
appreciate you
people.
more than you know.
And good work on the nurse there. Thank you, nurse.
Thank you, nurse.
Thanks,
Yeah.
nurse.
She's not Nurse Ratchet. And
no.
that's sorry, Todd. And that's Todd. And the reason I say she's not Nurse Ratchet is because Todd is actually calling from the institution
That was
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where Nurse Ratchet was. And I think what he's talking about, what you're talking about, is really important. I think we could identify too much with our addiction, with our disease, and it's a bridge back to life. This shouldn't be our whole life. You shouldn't be walking around after a certain amount of time sober, going, "This is who I am. This is my essence." It's not.
Yeah,
You're a unique
being a
person.
sponsor for 50 people in AA is not a career.
Right.
And that's just as compulsive and obsessive as the addiction.
In many
you just
ways.
switch it to a social addiction of trying to be an expert in something that actually you're really not.
Right, and is using your time wisely, and it's like Todd was saying, it's. I mean, I guess that's the best way of doing it. Is you focus, and then afterwards.
Yeah, but a lot of this once again is lack of resources and lack of the coordination of care, and we've never had that in this country. There's never been a situation where we had coordinated what we call the continuum of care, from high acuity to low acuity, and then making the transitions from different levels of care cohesive so that people actually get good quality care.
How do you? But don't you think some? I mean, it's. I agree with you completely. Don't you think, in a sense, it's very Pollyannic to think that could, it's a country of so many different personalities and people.
Well, a lot of it has to do with politics,
Yeah.
right? The nanny state fear, the idea that government actually would get into medicine and socialize it. But these are not things that can happen without coordination. And unfortunately, government is the only type of entity that can really coordinate on a mass scale a continuum of care.
Yeah. Let's go to Gary.
That was Judas Republican, yeah.
Gary, welcome to Clean Radio.
Hey, Gary.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Yeah.
Good.
I just have a quick story about how my sister lives up in the Central Valley where she owns 44 acres of land.
Right.
And her well went dry because, up there in that area, the drought situation.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of the other ranchers kind of know each other. And she was talking to one once, and he said, "Well, my son-in-law is a water witch." He goes, "Really?" She goes, "Really? So why don't you have him come over?"
I'm waiting for the punchline.
Yeah.
So the guy came over, and in nice SUV, dressed really nice, he and his wife. He got out of his vehicle, surveyed his land. She owns 44 acres, and he was able to study how water flows underground. And he got his little stick out, and he walked about 75 yards right to the destination and got a signal. And he said, "You put a stake down." He said, "You drill here, you'll find 4 times the amount of water you've ever found."
Okay, Gary, how is this important to mental health or addiction? Which is what we're talking about.
I'm sorry. I didn't know they'd let me on. I didn't know.
You just
Thank you,
well,
Gary,
no,
for the call.
I think it's interesting though that some, this is what we call tangential thinking, where people think you can talk about anything when there's actually a topic, and that's a problem that a lot of people have. People that are bipolar, you see that a lot. They'll actually go from, and I'm not saying Gary's bipolar, but people that are bipolar, they'll actually go from one topic to another while you're still trying to figure out the first topic they're talking about. So
let's diagnose Gary next time.
Yeah,
Just give us a little more time.
Maybe Gary should call and give us his real
earlier
symptoms.
To the show, you could tell us about the well story and the 44 acres of land.
Diagnosing people off their water magical thinking thoughts.
But it's let's get back to the selfies. Let's get back to Facebook for a second.
You want to get back to your selfies?
Because we are running out of time.
Dude, you have a way of phrasing things. It's just always. We only have like a minute and 30 seconds left here.
And I want to get back to that quickly because I do think I think a lot of people are lonely. I think a lot of people are scared, and a lot of people, it's like their identity is taking these selfies. Their identity is posting on Facebook and praying people like it.
Isn't part of it marketing, self-marketing for whatever needs they're trying to fill? I mean, a lot of that's sex, and I get a sense of emptiness that they feel about themselves and need for approval instead of having a sense of self-worth.
Whatever it is, it's. I think people are doing it, and I mean, they're coming out with these studies about the dangers of these things. of, because you're never going to get the acclaim that you want. You're never going to
So
take.
it's not just your friends that are looking at this stuff. It's all sorts of creepy guys. I mean, like this, and I don't care if you're a guy or a female who's taking the picture. There's a lot of creepy guys out there. So, it's part of testosterone. It can make people creepy. So, don't think it's just your mom and your friends looking at this stuff. It's, and you put a lot of information out there. You're wondering why there's problems with, privacy and issues of, identity theft and stuff like that. People, they just don't think, anything you put on the internet, it's out there for everyone. And it's just, we're not teaching people how to have a good sense of appropriateness for online behavior.
And, and so if
and for their own protection, not because I care.
And so if you're going through a problem, if you're having issues or anything, give us a call. The number is 888-601-6040. That's 888-601-6040. I want to thank everybody that came out to listen to the show tonight. Guys, you're supposed to clap when I do that. And
we don't have an applause sign.
And Sam, I am going to tell that joke eventually about the homeless guy's T-shirt that we saw driving down the highway. It was one of the funniest shirts, and he wouldn't stop laughing, and I can't remember it. And you'll tell me later, and I'll post it on Facebook.
I love it how you're telling a joke that you don't know.
No, I'm telling the story.
Who gets on the radio and tells a joke that they don't know? I actually, Judah, I actually have this way to make a lot of money. I forgot how to do it, though. Yeah. So next time, I'm going to keep talking about it, but one day I'll get to it.
And this has been the Andrew Being Mean to Judah hour. And
Judah, I love you. I mean, how would we entertain each other if it wasn't for you?
And so give us a call. Again, that's 888-601-6040. That's 888-601-6040. You've been listening to Clean Radio. Andrew's going out of town this week. Have a great week. I want to thank everybody that listens to the show, everybody that contacts us through Facebook. That's facebook.com/Clean Radio. Go. We actually respond.
We actually have a new website up.
Yeah.
We just have a redesign of KLEANradio.com, and you can really go and look at all the past episodes. So I'd encourage, we have like almost 200 episodes, I think, now. So, and it's video and audio. So I encourage people to go look at the new site. It's really cool.
So please do that. I want to thank, Rand. I want to thank Patrick. I want to thank Buddy. I want to thank everybody that helps put the show together.
Should we put a teaser out there about the Judah tattoo?
Sure, go for it.
So somebody in our company tattooed Judah's face on them, and that will be on the internet soon. We're running out of time, but that little teaser for next week will give you more information on it.
And so the discussion continues at KLEANradio.com. Sorry we didn't get to all the calls tonight, but we will get back to you. Rand is telling me, we'll get back to you next week. So I want again to thank all the people that came into the show tonight. And if you're struggling out there,
one person clap finally.
If you're struggling out there, we have to give tips for when we have studio audiences now. So give us a call. That's 888-601-6040. That's 888-601-6040. We're going to be in Portland pretty soon. We're going to be visiting Todd and all the institutions around America. We'll be live in open studio. So I just want to thank everybody very much. The discussion continues at KLEANradio.com.
Don't let addiction to drugs or alcohol steal another year of your life. KLEAN Treatment Center provides world-class addiction assistance that also treats the underlying causes and provides vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean. Live, kind, professional help is standing by to provide immediate assistance or to simply answer questions and provide guidance. If you or someone you care about is suffering from addiction, take action now and make 2014 the best year of your life with KLEAN Treatment Center.